Okay, hi everyone. So thank you for joining another class. Today we continue our learning journey and excited for us to get into some good stuff today. It's good to see you all. So just to go over the things we'll be covering today. So today we will quickly review CSS. We'll just quickly go over some of the things we've covered. We'll talk about Flexbox, Froggy, and Front-End Mentor. More when we get there. We'll quickly speak briefly about responsive design. Then we'll jump into JavaScript. We'll talk about the intro to JavaScript. We'll talk about data types. We'll talk about conditionals, and then we'll try and build out a simple calculator. So that's our agenda for today. As always, before we begin, if you have any questions from last class or anything, please feel free to ask. So if anyone has any questions, we'll give it a few minutes. You can either throw it in chat. So I have chat opened. You can either throw it in chat or come off mute. So if you have any questions. Okay, so if no one has any questions, can you still hear me? Okay, I think you can hear me now. Yeah, so if no one has any questions, we'll just dive straight into the material for today. So from our last few classes, give me a second, let me sort this out, 1 sec. Okay, so in our previous classes, we spoke about CSS, we spoke about a few CSS things. There's this that I quickly wanted to go over before we jump into the new stuff for today. So it's what is called specificity. So it's a mouthful, but essentially what specificity is, and sometimes you have to say it slow so you don't bite your tongue, is we spoke about how we can use classes, IDs, and element selectors to get items. Now, each of them comes with a sort of weight, if you like to. They have a weight that they come with, and it's just something that I felt was good that you know about, just in case you run into any problem. But yeah, so we said that classes are for selecting multiple items, so you can have different elements with the same class. So in this example, I have a paragraph which reads hello world, and I have another paragraph which reads goodbye Kumasi, and they both have a class of heading. So I could use that class to style both of these paragraphs. We said IDs are unique, so one ID for one item. You can't use the same ID for multiple things. Now, the thing about specificity is, and this is just going over IDs being distinct and classes for multiple items. The thing about all these ones is that each element has a weight, and it is usually taken into consideration when targeting an element to select. What this means is that, for example, if you had a paragraph and you had maybe an ID on it, and you used the paragraph to select the element. So maybe in our previous example, we have this paragraph which reads hello Accra. So if I used the element tag to select the paragraph and I gave it maybe the text color of blue, then I again maybe somewhere used the ID to select the same thing and I gave it a color of green, the ID will overwrite it. Why? Because IDs are heavier in weight, so IDs have higher specificity. Now we'll look at examples, but just so that you know, each item has, all the different selectors have some sort of weight. So the weight is what we call specificity. I mean, it's big English, but then in the end, all it just amounts to that each selector has some sort of weight. So the heavier it is, the likely that it is going to use that one to select it. So just for note takers, specificity is the algorithm used by browsers to determine which CSS declaration is most relevant to an element. So to make that simple, specificity is the way you see if I've targeted a paragraph and that paragraph has an ID and I've targeted the ID too. Specificity is the way the browser will know which of those instructions should I follow. Should I follow the ID instructions or should I just follow the elements instructions? And before we look at specific examples, let's just look at each of the weights. So in 10, you can think of tags. So tags are just the names of the element, like paragraphs, spans. If I use that to target the elements, the weight is essentially 1. I mean, this is an easy way to think about it. It's not exactly 1, but then you think of it, the weight is as 1. And classes weigh 10, IDs weigh 100, and bang important weigh 1,000. I mean, there are several reasons why you should never use a bang important. The only time you use a bang important is when you're trying to style something and you can't figure out why it is not styling and you need to do it quickly. Maybe a client is coming to check, so you give it like a bang important, which means overwrite everything and just use the one I've given a bang important. But just to show an example, so I'll open up my VS Code here. And just to show an example, let's create so I'm just creating 2 files for you to understand the concepts we are talking about. So let's just call this style.css. As always, we know that we fill it with our things, but I just have I have a short command, so I can just type it quickly. Specificity. That's such a hard word to say. So let's say we have a paragraph. So let's give it a paragraph, hello world. And by the way, let me just open this code so that as I make changes, we can see. So let me just make this. Let me make this smaller so that I can push it to the side. And let me make this bigger. So I'm just doing this so that when I make the changes, it will show immediately. Okay, so we have a paragraph with the body. Now let me link, as always, don't forget to link your CSS. So let me just link my CSS so that I don't wonder why my code is not working. So I have a paragraph body. Now we're saying that specificity is just the weight. So weight can sometimes affect which element is styled. So by default, if I give this paragraph, let's say a color of red, I mean, we expect it to be red. I hope you all can see my browser and my VS Code. If you can see, give me a thumbs up. Okay, great, thank you. So by default, when we give it a color of red, it has been given a color of red. Now we're saying that specificity is weight. And let me write it here so that we see. We say tags, which are just the element selectors weigh 1 equals 1. We are saying that classes weigh 10. We're saying that IDs weigh 100, and we're saying that bang important weigh 1,000. And by the way, if you have any questions whilst we go on, and let me just comment this out so that. So this is the tag. So this is an example of a tag. It weighs 1. So we're saying that classes weigh heavier than ID. So what that means is that if I give this a class, let's say green, and I came, if I can spell green, that's it. And I came into my CSS and by mistake, I targeted the same thing. And maybe I gave it like, I forgot that it's the same thing. So I targeted it, then I gave it a color of green. You will see that this thing has changed to green, but you'll be like, Cornelius, but it cascades. So let me move this to the top. But you can see that even though I've moved it to the top, it's not cascading, it's still staying green. The reason it's staying green is that classes weigh heavier than tags. So if you have a class and an ID and an element tag, because the classes weigh heavier than that, the class can overwrite, it can overwrite your tags, even regardless of cascading, because then classes weigh heavier. Now, in the same light, if I give this same thing an ID, let's give it an ID of blue. And I came inside and I targeted it. I gave it an ID. So by mistake, I came and I targeted the same thing, forgetting that it's something that I've already targeted. And I gave it a color of blue. We will see that now our element is blue. The same way we are saying, oh, Cornelius, a cascade. So let me move it. We can see that it's still blue. The reason it's blue is that IDs way heavier than classes and they way heavier than paragraphs. So if I have an ID holding something, it's most likely that the ID, the styling I give to the ID will overwrite everything. So that's one of the things I just wanted us to have in mind, that each of them has a particular weight. ID weighs the heaviest, classes are next. And we said bang important. So bang important is just 1,000 specificity. So if I came here and I did like a bang important, I'm saying that make this weigh the heaviest. So it will overwrite everything. And now you can see that my text is back to green because this bang important weighs 1,000. So it weighs heavier than all those things. So when you're targeting stuff and you're styling, just have that in the back of your mind that the elements or your selectors have weight. Tags weigh 1, classes weigh 10, IDs weigh 1,000, important IDs weigh 100, and bang important weighs like 1,000. So if you have these things targeting the same thing, it's likely that the ID will override it. So sometimes you just have to have that in your mind and things like that. Any questions? Does it make sense? Okay, Daniela says it makes sense. So that is just something that I wanted to go over quickly. Okay, so that is it for specificity. Now, just to go over some of the CSS we spoke about how every element in CSS is a box. The space inside of the box is the padding. The space outside of the box is the margin. The space outline is a border and stuff like that. I hope we haven't forgotten. And we spoke about how we can use the display property to control how the elements appear. So in our last class, we looked at how we could position stuff. And we used that example to position stuff. We were able to do our own rendition of the BBC site. Yes, so display, and I mean, we spoke about flex. And about flex, what I quickly wanted to share is there's a way to learn Flexbox. And when you go on this website, Flexbox Froggy, I had to say it slow so that I won't. If you go on Flexbox Froggy, Flexbox Froggy, there's a way you can learn Flexbox by just playing around. So they have like, they have a game that you can play to learn Flexbox. So if you are looking for more ways to learn Flexbox, you can just go to Flexbox Froggy. I'll put the link in chat and I'll share it in the email afterwards. So it's one of the things I wanted to mention. Another thing is, some of you told me that you were looking for more projects to practice. Now there's this website, it's called Front End Mentor. There's this website, it's called Front End Mentor. So what Front End Mentor does is they give you projects that you can build. So if you're looking for things to just build, and you don't have ideas, you can just go to Front End Mentor. And when you go on Front End Mentor, I'll just quickly open it up just so that we can see. So not to take too much time trying to load this up, I'll open one of the projects I have. So when you go on Front End Mentor, there are several projects. You can just find the one you want to do. So what they do is they give you like a design. They give you what colors to use, all those things. Because I mean, if you're not a designer, it's hard to design stuff. So on Front End Mentor, they just give you projects. When you download it, you can unzip it. When you unzip it, they give you like a project to build. So this is one example. And if anybody has had a chance to look at the class materials, you see that this is one of the projects I gave us homework to build. So they give you like this design, they give you like a style guide, like which colors to use, what fonts to use. So it's a really good way to like practice your front end skills. I mean, the things we've learned so far. So, I mean, if you're looking for projects to build, I recommend you go to Front End Mentor, just find things and just keep building. Like we've said several times, the only way you're going to get good at this programming thing is to build more stuff. Don't just listen to me talk. Don't just watch me write code, build more stuff. And Front End Mentor is really good because you just go find a design, find something you like, and they grade it. So if you're a newbie, they have projects for you, which will be things that we can all build based on the things we've learned. So that's one of the things I just wanted to share. Any questions? Okay, can you all hear me clearly? I just want to be sure.
Yes, it seems like you're breaking at a point, but it's okay.
Oh, okay, sorry. Okay, I hope that you can hear me now. So that's it about our HTML and our CSS. So today we're just going to try and jump into JavaScript. We're just going to try and jump in slowly so that we don't fall hard and hurt ourselves. So it's going to be a gradual introduction to JavaScript. I mean, so far we've learned really cool stuff. We've learned HTML. We can write content onto our page. We've learned CSS. We learned how to be able to add some styling. And just before we go into that, let me quickly touch on this. So most times, if you go on websites, you can see that the websites look different. It looks different on like a desktop. So on my desktop like this, it will look different than it will look on a mobile phone. So it's something that we call responsiveness. Just so that I don't forget. So responsiveness is essentially, there are two ways you can do responsiveness. One is like, first you do for it to fit on mobile, then you change the things to fit on desktop. So for example, you start with like smaller font size because on your phone, most likely your font size will be smaller. So then as you build, then the same, so they don't build two different things for a mobile phone and they build for a website, for like a desktop. It's usually the same thing, but then they make it responsive. So responsive is just a fancy term for saying that if I'm on a bigger device, it should be able to look nice on that bigger device. And most times the way you do that is by using like font sizes and those things. But one of the things that maybe I should mention is what we call media queries. So an example is in this are simple specificity sites. Let me just make it smaller. And responsiveness is, I mean, I'll just touch on it briefly, but it's something that you can look up yourself. So let's say this this is our site. This is our site. So for example, our site, we are saying that on a desktop, maybe we should, and maybe let me give it more text. So let me give it like a heading, responsive website. This is how to make our website more responsive. Okay, so apparently I can't spell. This is how to make our website more responsive. So by default, we can see that our website is covering this. Now there are things that I don't want to give you too much information, but when you look up the CSS docs, there's something that we call media queries. So media queries are essentially the different devices that you have and what size you want to. And whenever you come into your browser, there's this thing called developer tools. It's something that you should get used to. I've opened it a few times when I was trying to find a website. So developer tools are tools you use when developing. They allow you to see like different things, test out your code and stuff like that in your browser. Now, usually when you open your developer tool and you come here, this is the responsive button. So the responsive button just allows you to test how your page is looking on different devices. So if I click here, you can see I can check how my page will look on an iPhone. I can check how my page will look on. So That's one of the ways. So if I feel like on an iPhone, the space around it is too big, then I can make it responsive. I can add maybe more padding just so that on a smaller device, it looks big. Or maybe if my text was like going out of range, like my text is crossing here, based on like how it is looking here, I can make it responsive. So those are one of the things. So I recommend in your free time, just look up responsiveness and how to make your website or your web application more responsive. So I just thought I mentioned that briefly. I mean, we'll talk more about the developer console as we do JavaScript. So back to the slides. So just to jump into, and by the way, any questions so far? How are we feeling? Any questions before we jump into programming? Okay, if no questions, give me a thumbs up so that I know that at least you can hear me. Okay, thank you, Kenneth. So, yeah, thank you, Daniela. So just to jump into it, so let's talk about programming. I mean, most of us have heard the term programming. And just to ask, I mean, you can already see the slides, but in your own words, what do you think programming is? And it doesn't have to be any fancy answer. You can type in chat, you can come off mute. I like to hear some voices, but when you hear programming, like somebody says they are programming, what comes to mind? And I'd love to hear some voices. I'm tired of hearing my own voice. Or in chat, that's fine. Okay, someone private writing instructions for your computer. Okay, so earlier when we started talking about coding, and programming, one of the things we said is that your computer can only do what you tell it to do. And that holds true still. So your computer can only do what you tell it to do. And the process of telling your computer what to do or how to do it is what we call programming. So when we say we are programming, we're essentially writing a set of instructions for our computer to execute. So we're telling it to do ABC. Now it gets more, if you want to be nerdy, it gets more fancy when you go into like binary and it tells you how your computer understands things. So underneath the hood, when you go very deep into it, your computer doesn't speak English, it doesn't speak French, all it speaks is binary. And if you remember from our arithmetic classes or our algebra classes, we learned that binary is essentially zeros and ones. Now, you and I cannot write, I mean, when we say zeros and ones, it means that the only way your computer can understand anything is when it is presented to it as zeros and ones. So if I wanted to, for example, when we did our paragraph and we said this is a paragraph, the only way our computer can understand it, our computer doesn't understand actual English, this is a paragraph. Our computer only speaks in binary. So our code is transpiled to binary where it's zeros and ones. So we replicate this is a paragraph into computer code where it's zeros and ones. I don't know binary language. I don't think any of us know binary language. So most times the way we are able to write code for our computer rather than writing binary is to use a programming language. Now, underneath the hood, so when I say underneath the hood, it means that when you've written your code, what happens is that your code is compiled and or sometimes transpiled. It's transpiled into binary languages so that your computer can actually understand what you are saying. So your computer won't read, this is a paragraph, it will read a binary. So it will be a lot of zeros and ones. That is how it'll understand what you are trying to do. Then it will be able to execute. So by programming, what we're essentially doing is we're writing instructions for our computer to be able to understand and execute. So most of what we'll be doing here is writing instructions for our computer, telling it what to do. And then hopefully it will understand what we want to tell it to do. Now, there are different types of programming languages. You usually hear there are low-level programming languages. So low-level programming languages are ones where you have to do a lot of the work. You actually have to like be verbatim in terms of the instructions you are given to your computer. So those ones, they take like a lot of they're usually harder for people who are not coming from maybe a CS background and stuff like that. But then there are higher level languages where we can just write in English, then something is going on underneath the hood. We don't have to worry about what is being done behind the scenes to let the computer understand. Now, in this program or in our time together, one of the languages we're going to learn, the language we're going to learn is JavaScript. So the reason we are learning JavaScript is cross-platform. So it allows us to do stuff on in our browser, we can use the same JavaScript to build like mobile applications. So JavaScript gives us a lot of flexibility. And because it's sort of a higher level language, it's easy for like we beginners to be able to learn and understand it. So for our time together, we're going to be focusing on JavaScript. And don't worry, we won't be writing binary, we won't be writing zeros and ones and things like that. But we'll be writing JavaScript. Now, like we said, when we're talking about separation of concerns, we spoke about how HTML is for our content, CSS is for our styling, and JavaScript is for our behavior. So primarily, we're going to use JavaScript for our behavior. So if we want animations, if we want clickable buttons, if we want pop-up menus, all those things is going to be handled by JavaScript. Now, before we go further, I'll just show you how to add JavaScript to your current HTML. We still go back to our good old, usually the way you do it is just on top of your body closing tag, you do what we call a script. Now, a script is essentially, JavaScript is a scripting language. So script is just like your code, the language you are given to your browser. So you can come into your script and let's say maybe if I do, so one thing in JavaScript is alert. So I can alert stuff. So if I do alert, I am writing my first program. See that when I say my browser is alerting that, it's saying that I am writing my first program. Now, what that is me coding, me writing JavaScript. Now, the reason my browser knows that is what I'm writing is because I put it in a script tag. So alert is just essentially me telling it to say something. So you can see my browser is telling me that I'm writing my first program. It's telling it what I want to write. So that's one of the ways you can add your JavaScript to your HTML so that you can add interactions. But usually it gets tedious when you do like this. And we spoke about separation of concerns, separating our stuff so that we're not writing everything in one thing. So usually the way you do it is in your script, and let me just get rid of all this. In your script, you can have an SRC, and we've used SRC several times. We said SRC is source, so we're trying to link a file. So currently I don't have a JavaScript file. So let me just quickly create one. So let me just call it like main.js. And the file extension for JavaScript is JS. So the way I can link my JavaScript to my current code or my current application is by using a script tag. Then I just do main.js. I'm using main.js because it's in the same directory, so I don't have to link it. Now, if I come into the file and I do the same thing that we did, alert, hello, everybody, I should expect that, let me stop this and let me just save this again. I should expect that my thing is saying, hello, everybody. So don't worry, we haven't learned any JavaScript. First off, we're just learning how to link it. So the way we link it is we use a script file. So we're telling it that we're going to allow some dynamic things, and we're going to do that using our JavaScript file. So we are linking it, and we know how to link stuff already. So we use the SRC and we link it. So that's how you link your JavaScript file. Any questions so far? So like we've said, JavaScript allows us to do more interactions. It allows us to do cool stuff. I mean, the fancy animations, getting things to move and stuff like that. And because JavaScript is actually a programming language, you can actually write logic. So logic is telling it what to do. So we can say, maybe if something is happening, do this. If today is Monday, do this. We can't do that with our HTML and our CSS because those are mainly scripting and for syntax and things like that. So we can't really do that. But with JavaScript being a programming language, you can actually write logic. So all the things you're thinking in your mind that you want to do, JavaScript will allow you to do that. Okay. So we've learned how to add JavaScript to our code. Now, the other thing I just wanted to quickly mention is, and don't worry, we're just going over the basics before we actually dive into it. Like I was saying, so every browser comes with what we call a developer console. So a developer console is just a place where for developers when you are building. It's a place where you can type things, you can check out things, you can explore things. Now, when you click on your browser and you do inspect, except you are using like Microsoft Explorer and those things, they still have developer consoles, but I don't think anybody uses Microsoft. Yeah, but when you click on, you see inspect. When you click on inspect, it opens up your developer console. Or when you do Command Shift, I think on Windows, it should still open up your thing. So in every browser, you have what we call a developer console. Now, a developer console is just an environment where you can test out things, where you can see stuff. I mean, there are so many things here, but not to worry about them. Then one we want to be concerned about right now is what we call a console. So a console allows us to directly write our JavaScript in our browser. So if we're looking to quickly test out things, we can open up the console and type things. So for example, if I did 1+1, so I can test out JavaScript in my browser directly. So that's what we use the console for. The console is for testing out things and checking out things. Now, one of the other ways too, you can do things if you don't want to directly type it in, if you don't directly want to do it in your browser, is what we call a console log. So a console log is essentially allows you to see what you are doing. So for example, you can see that when I wanted to do the thing, I did alerts. Alerts brings up an ugly banner and things like that. But if I just wanted to see the same thing, so if I wanted to type something and see, I could do a console.log. So it means that in my console, log this thing. So in my console, log this thing. So it means in my console, print out this thing, or in my console, type this thing. So you can see it types out hello world in my console. So these are just some of the things I just wanted to. So in your browser, if you just quickly want to test out something or write out JavaScript directly in your browser, I mean, I don't think you want to write a lot of code in your browser, because if you write and you refresh, everything is gone. But if you are quickly looking to test out stuff, you do inspect, you can see your console and you can quickly type out things. Now the element part has our HTML. So if we wanted to check out our HTML, and then down here, we usually have our CSS. So sometimes if you want to see how things will work before you actually writing your code, you can come into your dev consoles. The element style is for HTML and CSS. The console part is for your JavaScript. Okay, so any questions?
Cornelius, can you go over the console part? I missed some part of it.
Okay, so the console is essentially something that comes with every browser. It allows you to write JavaScript directly in your browser. Now, the thing about JavaScript is it's probably the only language where you can write it directly in your browser. JavaScript is a browser kind of language. For most languages, if you write it, you don't see directly, like you have to transpile and deploy before you can see. But JavaScript, we can do that directly and see it in our browser. Now, our console is where we can write some JavaScript and see the results. So our console is a way of writing JavaScript directly in our browser. So if we come into our console and wanted to type out some quick logic, like I was saying, so maybe 2+2, we could do it in our console and we will see. If I wanted to log out something, we said console log is the way we log out something. So maybe hello world. So essentially say hello world. I see a question in the chat. I'm coming. Hello world. Our console is the place we could quickly test out things. And does console.log come with the available JavaScript for already existing? So console.log is a JavaScript thing. So it comes with every browser. So for example, if I went into an empty browser and I did inspect, so this is like an empty browser, I haven't searched for anything, and I go to my console. The console is just a place I can write JavaScript. So console.log is something that comes with the JavaScript language. It's not necessarily your website. It's something that you can add when you're writing logic for your website, but it's something that comes with the language. And when we learn syntax, we'll learn about the things that comes with JavaScript. But the console is just a place where you can write out JavaScript and test it out directly in your browser. I mean, most times we'll be using VS Code to write our code, because then, I mean, the thing about writing in your browser is if I write in my browser and forgetfully, or maybe I'm going to drink water and somebody comes and refreshes my page, all the things I've written here will be gone. So most likely we'll write it in our IDE. But if we wanted to test out things or just check out things, we could use the console and just write our JavaScript directly in our browser. Does that make sense, Kenneth? And Amma, does that make sense too?
Yes, thanks.
Okay, great. So in summary, the console is just a place that we can directly write JavaScript inside of our browser. Okay. So now to jump into the language itself. So to jump into the language itself, now every language so far we've learned, as we've been learning, we've learned that every language has its own syntax. Now, syntax is basic. Think of syntax like grammar. So when you're learning French, you have syntax for French. You have to learn how they conjugate things there. You have to learn all those things. If you're learning English, you have to learn grammar, all those things. Programming languages are no different. Programming languages come with their own syntax. So you have to learn how to put things together. Now, the first and most important thing you learn in JavaScript is variables or variables. So variables are essentially the way you can store something and use it again. So for example, back into my browser, when I did 1 + 1, when I did 1 + 1, it gave me 2. Now I just did 1 + 1. So if I want to use it again, there's no way I can actually use the same thing again. I actually have to come and type 1 + 1 and get the result. But maybe if I needed the result for something, maybe I was doing something where I needed the result to use later on, I could store it in what we call a variable. So a variable is a way of storing data. So I could maybe give it const, add something and give it the, so I'm saying that store the value of 1 + 1 in add something. So if I did, it says undefined, but now if I come and I do add something, we can see that the value is 2. So I could store that in a variable so that I can use it later on. Because if I don't store it in anything, there's no way I can use it again. So every time I want the same thing, I have to type it again. So variables are a way of storing data or storing information so that you can use them again. Any questions? Okay, great. So variables are the first thing. Variables are ways of storing information so that we can use them again. Because if you don't store them in anything, it'll just poof into the air. Because 1 + 1, every time I have to type 1 + 1 and get the answer. But if I needed the answer to do something in the future, I could just store whatever the result of 1 + 1 is in a variable so that I could use it again and again and again. So variables are used to store. Amma, do you have a question? I can't hear you very well.
Is it better now?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay, what do variables consist of then? Like, is it always maybe like numbers, or what does it consist of?
Okay, so we'll learn about data types, but variables can store data types. So when we talk about data types, we'll talk about the things that you can store in variables. But variables can store anything as long as it is permitted within the language. Variables can store anything. And variable names can be anything. You can give it. So you can see in this example, I gave my variable name add something. Add something. The only recommendation when you're giving variable names is give it something that is meaningful so that you won't come back a week later and you're wondering, hey, what does this variable do? Because I named it coffee and I don't know what coffee does. So that's the only thing. But variables can store different data types, and that leads us right into talking about data types. But before we talk about data types, there are ways you declare. Let me just do this. So there are different ways you can declare variables. So there are 3 ways essentially you can declare variables. You can use var, let, and const. Now, previously we used to use var before JavaScript was updated. So usually, like when we're talking about HTML, we said now we're using HTML5 because they've added new things, and CSS, we're using CSS3 because they've added new things. It's the same thing with JavaScript. Occasionally, the ECMA scripts, the people in charge, occasionally they update stuff, they add new stuff, they make things easier. So before we had let and const, we used to use var. So whenever you wanted to declare a variable, before you do add something, you have to declare it. So the way I know that your browser or your program knows that you're declaring a variable, you have to give it a var. So var means that I'm declaring a variable. But there are reasons why you didn't want to use var, because right now it causes a lot of issues. And maybe we'll get into it when we are writing a lot of code. But if you want to declare something before the name of the variable, you do what we call let or const. You could also do const. So const Connie or const name. So this is the way you declare a variable. So you declare by first prefixing it with a let or const. Now let means, I mean, they do the same thing. The difference between a let and const is that const means it's constant, so you can't change it. So if I do name is equal to Cornelius, I can come back and do name. And just to know, after you've declared it, when you're using the same variable again, you don't have to do const again. So if I come back and do name is equal to Amma, and if we check, already I've opened this thing, so we should see our results in the browser. So if I do name is equal to Amma, if we said the way we can see things is by console logging it. So if I console log name, or before that, let me first do name. Let me do name so that we can see it's logged. So let's say name. So if I save name, we can see that console log is a way of me printing it out essentially. So I'm saying that show me what I'm doing. So if I console log it, you can see that now name is Cornelius, like you can tell in the console, name is Cornelius. Now, if I came back and I did name is equal to Amma, and I save it, it's giving me an error. It's saying that assignment to constant variable at main. All it's saying that is that because I've used the const, I can't use that same thing and give it another value. So const is for variables where you're not going to change it. So if I use const, I can't redeclare it and give it something else. But then if I use let, so let me comment this thing out. If I did let name, again, the way we declare variables is we have either let or const before it, the name of the variable, and we use equal to. So we are saying that this is the variable. The variable, what we are storing inside is what is on the right side of the equal to sign. So let's say name is equal to who is next? Daniela is next on the list of Athena. So if we did let name equals Daniela, and I console, so the way I can see what I'm doing is, let me console log it. So when I console log, it will show up in the browser. Console.log. If I console log name, I can see that name is Daniela. But when I use let, I can always redeclare. So for example, if I came again, I did name is equal to George. And I console log name now. I can see that now the name is George. The only reason we can still see Daniela is because I didn't. So now we can see that the name is George. So when I use let, I can always reassign it. So it means I can change the value I stored inside my variable. But when I use const, I'm saying that it's constant. So I never want to change the value that I have assigned to my variable. So those are the differences between let and const. So those are most of the things you use. Now, most times you use const because it's not always that you would want to change the data, but if you have some data that you think that in the future you might change. For example, if I was doing let day equal, or if I know the day will change, so maybe I'll use let because I know that tomorrow will be Sunday. So I know that the value will change. But then if I have a variable, if I have a value that I think that, oh, it will never change. So let me say, let today's class be on like 11th of March. I know that it will never change. So maybe I'll use a const to day of class equals, and let me just type the short way. So I know that it will never change. So I could just use a const. But then if I know that it will change later on, I'll use a let. Most times you just use a const. Yeah. So those are ways we declare a variable. So we either use let or const, the name of the variable, and what value we are trying to store into it. Hello, well. Yes. Any questions so far? Okay, doesn't make sense. If it makes sense, you can give me a thumbs up so that I know we're on the same page. Okay, no thumbs up doesn't mean, okay, there we go. Okay, so just to reiterate what we said, we declare a variable by using either let or const, and this is the variable. So you could just declare a variable. Now, when we're assigning a variable a value, this is the initializer. This is the what you want to call your variable, and the right side is the value you are trying to store into it. So example is let name of person equals Cornelius. So I'm storing this value in name of person. So every time I use name of person, it will refer to Cornelius unless I change it. Now, as you can see, I'm starting every new word. Apart from the first one, I'm starting every new word with a capital letter. That's what we call camel case. And then it's the convention for like developers. We usually use camel casing. I mean, the other ways you could do it, some people do like, so like let name underscore of underscore person. You could do that. I mean, it's usually preference, but most times we just do camel casing. And camel casing is essentially where you just start the first letter. Apart from the very first one, everyone that comes afterwards, you started with a capital letter. So name of person. It doesn't affect your code in any way. It's just a way of like structuring your code so that it looks clean and everything. So, I mean, the recommended way is usually to use camel casing. But if you feel like you're an underscore person and you want to separate them with an underscore, you could go ahead. Now, the other thing to note is that variable names cannot start with a number. So I can't start my variable name with a number. I can't start my variable name with a number. So they always start with a character, so text. But then they could have a number inside. So name of person, and just so that we'll be using camel case, and so I just stick to. So I could do name of person one, name of person one. I could do, let me just copy this line. Control C, Control V. I could do name of person two, then maybe give it a value. So Ama, Tom. So that's the way. So you could add numbers, but your variable names always start with actual text. You don't start your variable names with numbers. Any questions? Okay, we're almost at the top of the break, but before we take the break, let's just do one more slide. So far, I hope it's making sense. So the only thing, maybe let's spend the rest of the break reiterating the things we've spoken about. So we said a computer can only do the things you tell it to do. Now, the way in our first programming language that we are learning to actually instruct the computer to do something is JavaScript. Now, we're saying that JavaScript is cross-platform. So we can use it to make our things interactive. We can use it to make our buttons clickable, stuff like that. We can also use it to write logic. Now, we've learned the way we can connect our JavaScript to our code or our HTML. We link it with a script tag to our HTML. We link it with the script tag at the bottom, just above of the body. So just to go back, get rid of this. Just above the body, we link it and the name of our JavaScript file. We said our JavaScript extension is .js. Again, CSS is .css, our HTML is .html. Our JavaScript is .js. We link it right above our script tag. So when we link it like this, it means that anything we do here we can show it in our browser. Now, the reason we usually link it in our browser is because what we see, like we said, what we see is HTML. So the way we can actually see our JavaScript in our thing itself is to link it to our HTML. That's why we are linking it, because JavaScript is just logic. We're not writing actual content because we said HTML is for our content. So the way we can link our content to interactions is to link it to our HTML file. That's why we link it to our HTML file. So yes, so that's how we write instructions. Then we've spoken about how to declare variables. So we've spoken about how if we want to test out things, we can use the browser console. So if you open your browser, you right click, you can see inspect. And then in your console, you can do things. Now, the same way, you can use a console.log. So console.log essentially means that show this thing in my console. So if I open my browser, whatever I have written in my JavaScript as console.log, is something that will show up in my browser console. So that's one of the ways of showing things in your browser console. And then the last thing is how to declare variables. So we said that variables are a way of storing our data. into something so that we can always reuse them. Because then if we don't store them in anything, our browser will forget. Again, our browser, not our browser, our computer will forget. Our computer, the way we store things in our computer memory is by using a variable. So when we have a variable, we can assign it a sort of data, whichever data. Now, when we come back from the break, let me just open up the timer. When we come back from the break, we will quickly dive into some data types, learn the kinds of data there is in JavaScript and the different kinds of data that we can store. Do you guys like the break, or you feel like we should continue? I feel the break is necessary because we are learning so much. So take a break, walk around. But how do you guys feel about the break? Give me a thumbs up if you like the break. Okay. Okay. I think we all like the break. So I'm starting the timer. And I'll see you all in 5 minutes. Just walk around. Don't try and read. Walk around, relax your brain. When we come back, we'll continue. So see you in 5 minutes. Okay, welcome back, everyone. I hope you had a good break. Okay, so just to jump back into it. 1 second. Okay, so now let's get into the meat of the things we've been talking about. And let me open up Zoom here so that I can see the chat. Okay, to jump into the meat of what we've been talking about. So we've spoken about how to declare variables. Now, the way I could just go into, like, I could just take a pen and write a sentence, and automatically I know that this is like a sentence. You have to actually implicitly tell your computer what kind of data you're writing, or what kind of data this is. So in JavaScript, there are a number of data types that we have, and we'll go over all of them. Now, the very first one is what we call a string. So a string is textual data. Textual data is essentially just text. So like, my name is, JavaScript allows us to do that, and it's called a string. Now, strings are prefixed with commas. I don't know what you call those things, but let's just open it and let's just write it so that. So the very first data types that JavaScript allows us to, or we have in JavaScript, is what we call a string. Now, the way we know a string is prefixed by this. So I think they are called commas. No, they're not called commas. Again, this is what happens when you miss a lot of your grammar classes. But then are they semicolons? I don't know what they are, but then this is the way you write a string. So you put your text in this. So hello, everyone. So if you have textual data, you have to wrap them in this. You could also use one. So you know, on your browser, on your keyboard, there's the one that has the 2 and the one that has the 1. Both of them work. So it's really preference. I mean, sometimes I interchange them, but if you have text, so I can't just come and type, hello, everybody. My computer doesn't know what hello, everybody is. So for me to let it know that it is text that I'm writing, or if it's a paragraph, if it's text, I have to wrap it within this. So that is what we call string. So string is essentially just a sequence of characters. So if I have hello world, I can't just write hello world, because then my computer won't know what hello world is. It's just random words. But then to tell it that this is maybe a string of text or a string of characters, I wrap it within this. So hello world. Then it won't try an error. Then it will know that, oh, this is like a sequence of character. This is text. So the first one we have is, those are what we call strings. So strings are essentially just the sequence of characters, just sequential data or textual data. So if you have text or you want to write text, you wrap it in this, in that thing that I don't know what it's called. Could someone tell me in chat, what is it called? Is it a quotation mark? Yes, thank you, Amma. It's called quotation mark. So you wrap them. No, so you wrap them in the quotation mark. So this is just a comment. So a comment just means that when I do this, I just tell my computer that, or my browser, that when I run, this is not part. This is just like comment. So if you want to comment something, so comments is maybe notes for yourself so that you remember what you're doing. You just put like // or you can highlight it and do Ctrl// or make a comment. So comment means it's not part of your code. It's just something to read. But then if you want to do a string, text data, if you want to write text, you wrap them within quotation marks. You can either use the single quotation mark or the double quotation mark. So now if I do, so for example, let me log this just so that we do. If I logged this without the quotation mark, and where's my browser? Let's see what the browser will say. So if let me open my console, because then if I log something, my console can just print it out. So if I logged this into my console and I saved it, sorry, let me split the screen too. Okay, so if I logged this thing and I saved it, so if I save it, so my browser is telling me that, hello, is not defined because my computer doesn't know what hello is. Hello is just random. So to let it know that it is actual text that I'm writing, I have to wrap it within the quotation mark. So when I wrap it in a quotation mark, then my browser actually knows that I'm trying to write text or I'm trying to put together a sequence of characters. So when I log it, now it will log. And just so that you see the error again, if I do, it says that reference error, hello is not defined. So it doesn't know like what hello is, what is hello. But then when I put it in quotation mark, it knows that, oh, I'm trying to write text. So then it'll print it without an error. So the first data type we have is what we call a string. And a string is essentially just text to our data or a sequence of characters. Now, the next one we have, which you are probably familiar with, is numbers. Now, numbers are just numbers. So the same way you have numbers, you have them in programming too, and more specifically, you have them in JavaScript. Now, most of these data types are synonymous across different programming languages. So you have a string in almost every programming language. You have numbers too. Now you have numbers. So when I do a number, so if I want to see again, if I want to log something in my console, I do a console.log so that it points it out. So if I do 1, it logs out the 1. And I mean, it's still logging out this one because I have it. But so I can see 1. So that is another data type that we have in JavaScript. It's numbers. So we have numbers. Now, again, if I wanted to store them in variables, so I could do maybe let name equals, because a name is text, I have to wrap it within quotation marks. So I do Cornelius. So if I console.log, so instead of console.login, I could console.log the variable. So if I console.log name, it prints out Cornelius. But if I did it without the quotation marks, it'll be like, oh, what is this? I don't know what this is. It tells me Cornelius is not defined. What is that? So text data is this. Then the next one is numbers. So you have numbers in JavaScript, you have numbers in programming, you can do numbers. Numbers just come as they are. You don't have to wrap them in anything. So you have like 1, 2, 3. You have all of those. Now, if you have familiarity with other programming languages, for example, Python, you have what they call floats. So floats are floating point numbers, like 1.5. So essentially numbers that have decimals and things like that. But in JavaScript, you don't have those. All those are considered numbers. So you don't have like integers, which are numbers without the decimal points, and floating point numbers, numbers with the decimal. In JavaScript, everything is a number. Like not everything is a number, but every numerical thing is a number. So 1.2 is still a number, it's not a float. So another data type that we have in JavaScript is a number. Now the next one is Boolean. So Booleans are logical values. So essentially true or false. So if we wanted to check if something was true or false, we have what we call a Boolean. A Boolean is just a logical value representing true or false. So it can either be true or false. So that is another data type we have. So if I do 1 plus 1 equals 2, let me log. So let's save it in a variable. And I'm doing this in variable so that we can get used to storing variables. So let me see, check if correct. So if I do 1 plus 1 equals 2, and I console log, again, you see I use three equal to signs. We'll talk about it later. But if I do console.log, check if correct, it tells me true. So that is a Boolean. A Boolean is a logical representation of true or false, checking if something is true or false. So that is another data type we have in JavaScript, where we can check if something is true or false. Now, just to quickly go over I have a slide for it, but just to talk about it. When you're assigning things, use 1 equal to sign. But if you are checking for equality, or if you are checking if it is equal to something, you don't do 1 equal to sign. So if I want to check if 1 plus 1 is equal to 2, I don't do equal to 2. I use triple equals 1, 2, 3. That means I'm checking for equality. But if I do just 1 equal to sign, it will just assume that I'm assigning a variable. So it just assume that I'm assigning 1 plus 1 to something. So the way you check for equality Or if you want to check if something is true or false, use 3 equal signs. I mean, you can use 2 or 3. There are reasons why you use 2 over 3. We'll talk about it further down the line. But then if you're assigning a variable, so just to state it again, if you're assigning a variable like the way we've been doing, use 1 equal sign. If you want to check for equality or anything, use 3 equal to signs, so 1, 2, 3. So don't get it confused. So this is 1 equal to sign is to assign a variable. Is for assignment, and 3 equal to signs is to check for equality. Does that make sense? Thumbs up if it makes sense. Okay, thank you, George. Does it make sense for the rest of us? Okay, cool. So far we've spoken about strings. So we said strings are just text. So if you want to do text, or if we want to write out things, we can't just write them. We have to tell our computer that what we are writing is text. So then we put them in quotation marks. You can either use the single quotation mark or double quotation mark. George, do you have a question? Are you confused about something? I see your emoji. Or it's a mistake. Okay, I guess it's a mistake. So if you want to do text, you put them in quotation mark. Numbers are just the numbers we know. Now there's Boolean. Boolean is essentially true or false, so logical value. So to check true or false. Now the next thing we have is undefined. Undefined. So undefined means that a variable has just not been assigned a value. So like we've been doing variables. We do let's name. Let's do something else. Let's name the only thing we know. Let's age equals maybe 100 because I'm 100 years. So if I do this, I've assigned this variable a value. But then if I don't assign it a value and I just do this, it's undefined. Why is it undefined? It's undefined because I haven't given it a value. So it has no value. So if I were to, and the way you can check for what type of data a variable is, conveniently, there is something called type of. So if I do type of age, now if I want to see it in our console, I mean, because we are not writing actual code, we're just doing simple things to test in our browser, I'll just console.log it so that it will show up in the browser. So if I console log type of age and I save it, we can see that the type of, and let me remove the name so that it doesn't confuse us. Let me comment it out. We can see that the type of is a way of checking what type of data, what data type, whatever our variable is. So when I check type of age, it says undefined. The reason it's saying undefined is because I haven't given it any value. If I went ahead and I gave it 23, what type of data type would we think age is? If I give it age is equal to 23, if I checked the type of age, what type of data type would it be? And this one, I want to hear answers. Type it in chat. Hey, are we afraid? I mean, we are learning, so let's not be afraid to type. So if okay, so Kenneth says number. Why is it a number? Because the value we have given it is a number. So if I did type of age and we saved, we can see that as a number. The reason it's a number is because the value we have given it is a number. So that is the data type of it is a number. But if we haven't given it anything, the data type is undefined because then we haven't given it any value. Now you can see, so I have a formatter. That's why I always have the semicolon. So in JavaScript, the way you usually end your code or a line of code is to use the semicolon. But then if we don't use the semicolon, it won't throw an error. I have a formatter I use. So every time when I save, it just adds the semicolon by default. So I can't save without a semicolon. But if you write the code without a semicolon, it will still not give you an error. It's just that most programming languages, you usually end your line of code with a semicolon, but it's in JavaScript, it's not really a thing. So if you saved it without a semicolon, it'll still be fine. So don't worry about that. So that's the next one. So far we've looked at strings, we've looked at numbers, we've looked at Booleans. We said Booleans are just true or false. So true or false things. We've looked at undefined. So we said undefined is when we declare a variable, but we've not given it a value. That will be undefined. Now, the next one is null. And null can be a bit confusing, but all that null is that. So far, we said when we save a variable, we are storing it in memory. So we are giving it something to save in memory so that we can always retrieve it. Now, when a data type is null, it means that in our memory, we are saying that there's nothing in memory. So we are not storing anything in the memory. We just want it to be empty. So if I give like, let's my age, and again, camel case, and let my age equals null. All I'm saying is that in my computer memory, I want the value for my age to be empty. I don't want it to save anything. I want it to be empty. So null means that a variable has been set, but it has no value. So it is empty. It is empty without any value in it. So that's it. So when the data type null just means that in my computer memory, there's nothing saved, like it is empty. So you can explicitly say that in your computer memory for my age. Maybe I'm trying to hide my age. So in my computer memory, I'm saying about my age, even though I'm saving the variable age, but there it shouldn't have any value. It should be empty. So null is a way of setting it to empty. Now there's the last one they have, which is symbol. Symbol is unique. It's really confusing, and it's not really something that you have to worry about because you wouldn't face it a lot. But essentially, symbol is a unique and immutable value that can be used as a key. So, but don't worry about symbols for now. But so, for example, you can have like a dollar sign, you can have like percentages and stuff like that. So there are 6 primitive data types. So 6 primitive data types are essentially the data type that comes with the language. Now, there are things that you can do. So you can do like arrays, objects, but that is beyond the scope of today's introduction. So the 6 primitive data type that we've covered is strings. Strings is text data, textual data, a sequence of characters. You have numbers, you have booleans. Booleans are just true or false. Undefined means that you have declared a variable, but you haven't given it any value. So name is equal to age. If I did let age, and I haven't given it any value, the value is what comes on the right side of the equal to. So here I haven't given it any value. It means that it's undefined. Nor means that in my computer memory, I've set that it shouldn't have any value. So I've intentionally said that in my computer memory, this variable has no value, so no value. So instead of it to be undefined, so instead of me to do like let my age and just leave it so that will be undefined, I can actually set it that let my age be equal to null, which means that it has no value. Do the data types make sense, please? Do the data types make sense, or anybody wants me to go over one of them? Okay, great. So these are most of the data types that you use. You'll be using strings, you'll be using numbers, booleans, null. I mean, you wouldn't really use null. Most times when I use null, it's by mistake. I didn't mean to. So I mean, most times the ones you use the string, numbers, booleans, but those are the data types that you will encounter most time. Maybe right now you don't see how you use all them. The ones which are very obvious is probably numbers and maybe strings, because a lot of times you'll be typing things. So those are the 2 main things. Now in JavaScript, we can still do like logic, arithmetic, like the way we do in regular math. So we use the plus sign for addition the same way we do. We use the minus sign for subtraction. We use the asterisk for multiplication. We use this / for division. And this is probably the one that you've not encountered before, but it's modulus. So modulus is essentially just remainder. So if, for example, if you divided, let me just do it. So modulus is just remainder. So if I divided 10 by 3, I know that there will be a remainder of 1. Why? Because 3 times 3 is 9. So there will be a remainder of 1. So if you want to check for remainders, you use modulus. So 3 mod 1 is 10 mod 3 is 1. So modulus is just remainder. So if you want to check for remainder, you use the modulus. So these are essentially some of the arithmetics you have in JavaScript. So plus for addition, all these ones, which you most likely have encountered. Again, I mean, I think I jumped the gun, so I spoke about this. So I said the way you can check for equality is by using triple equal signs. You don't use one equal sign. If you use one equal sign, it means you're assigning the value. You're assigning that value to the variable. So you use triple equal signs if you are trying to check for equality. So for example, if you did 9 triple equals 9, it will give you true, which is a Boolean. Why? Because 9 equals 9 is true. So when you check, usually when you check for equalities and stuff like that, the result you get is a Boolean, either true or false, because you are checking for equality. So it's either true or false. So that is usually a Boolean. So if you check 7 equals 3, it will give you false because 7 is not equal to 3. So the way you check for equality is this. Now, the other thing I just want to mention is that we said that strings have the quotation mark. Now, if I do a string 7, because we said quotation marks it as the data type of string. Now, a string 7 is not equal to a number 7 because when we use a quotation mark, we are saying that this is a string. We are telling our computer that this is a string, and our computer only knows what we tell it to do. So if I do this, this is not a number, this is a string. So my computer reads this as text data. And just to prove it, if I do 7 string is equal to 7, it'll give me false. Why? Because this is a string, because it has quotation marks, and this is a number. So that is one of the things to note. If you have quotation marks around it, it's a string, so it's not a number. So if I do it, it's a string 7 equals to number 7 is false because they are not the same thing. I hope that makes sense. Any questions, please? Any questions? Are we learning anything? Or am I talking to myself? Okay, so this is just some logical operators too. I mean, it's blurry, I should have done it well. But if x is equal to 3, so double equal to is x equal to, so everywhere you see x, just make it 3 because I've assigned the 3. I've declared a variable x and I've assigned it 3. So I'm just showing you the different logical operators you can do. So I'm saying is 3 equal to 8, which is false. I'm saying is 3, the number 3 equal to the string 3, which is false because one is a string, one is a number. So a number 3 is not equal to the number 3. The number 3, a string 3 is not equal to the number 3. Now, is 3 equal to 3? It will return true because then it's true. So usually when you check for equality and things, it returns the Boolean either true or false, just to say it again. Now, we're saying that the way you can check if something is not equal to is you put an exclamation mark before it. So if I want to check if something is not equal to, so if I want to check equality, is 3 equal to 3. I use triple equal sign. But if I want to check if something is not equal to, I put an exclamation mark before the one equal to sign. I mean, I think you can use 2, but you can use 1 too. So it's 3 not equal to 4, which will return true because 3 is not equal to. So this is how to check if something is equal to. This is how to check if something is not equal to. Yes, so yeah, you can use either 2 equal signs or 1 if you are doing not equal to. And the same way we have greater than, so it's 3 greater than, it's 3 less than, it's 3 greater than or equal to, it's 3 less than or equal to. So the same way you have in math, you can have the same way. And don't worry, it's not going to get very mathematical, so don't be scared. We're not going to do like complex math. It's just, these are just logical operators that occasionally you might use. So it's not equal to, it's not equal to, greater than. You can check if something is greater than, you can check if something is less than. So just to quickly, I mean, and I said in your console, you can quickly write our code, JavaScript, just to test it out in your browser. So it's 3 less than 4. It returns true because 3 is less than 4. And let me clear it. It's 3 is 5 greater than, it's 5 greater than 6. It's 5 greater than 6 false because 5 is not greater than 5. Yeah, so those are the different ways you can check for logical operators. I'll probably share the slides afterwards if you want to go over these things. Yeah, so these are some logical operators. Okay, now the last thing maybe before we write some code is conditional. So you can check, conditionals are ways of like checking for something and doing something afterwards. So if I said, if 5 is greater than to do something, if 5 is greater than to do something. So if 5 is greater than 6, make yourself blue. If 5 is greater than something, do you can do that programmatically, and it's called conditionals. Conditionals is a way of checking for something and then doing something as a result of the response you get. So this is the way you usually write it. If, then you have this. This is true, do something. Else, if it is false, do something. So these are ways of checking for conditionals. Conditionals are ways of just checking for something and doing something as a result. And maybe we write some of it, then it'll make more sense. Okay, so any questions before maybe we just code a bit and we run away? Any questions? And if you want to code along, I think you're free to code along. I shared the class material. Again, I don't know how many screens you have, so it might be hard to go back and forth. But maybe you can just watch, then you can watch the video again and just do. So first off, let's just do a simple calculator. So let me open this in my browser. Okay. Okay. So essentially all I have here, and maybe before we get to the calculator, let's just do something even simpler. I'll get rid of these. Okay, I guess we can use them. Okay, so let's just have H1. This is a calculator. Oh, this is a conditional. Let's just do conditionals. This is a conditional checker. Conditional checker. By the way, any questions before we start doing all these things? And we don't, I mean, we are not writing any CSS right now. I mean, and by the way, if you look in the materials, I shared that one of the folders is called templates. So it just has all the things that you need so that if you usually want to start a project, you can just like open it and start, right? And it has all the things you might need. And just that usually if you don't want to type out all those things, if you open up your HTML file in your VS Code, if you do exclamation point, usually pops up emit. I should think that emit comes by default, but if I do this and I press enter or the tab, it will just automatically fill it out for me so that I don't have to manually type everything. And the only thing I usually change is this. Now, I'm sure most of us don't know these things, but these things, the meta tag is just the language that I'm specifying the language that I'm using. I'm using a UTF-8. Don't worry about what that is. It's just what the language that you use all the time for your browser. And I'm just saying that my viewport, it should be the width of the device. So things like that. So these things are default. You don't have to remember them. If you do emit, you do exclamation point, it should usually pop up this thing. And when you select it, it'll just fill it out for you. The only thing you have to worry about is just changing your title. Then if you have CSS, you link your CSS. Then if you have link your CSS, I had caps lock on, link your CSS here. Then just above the body tag, you link your JavaScript here. So you do script src, link your JavaScript. So those are the ways to, but not to worry about. I have a template here that you can just quickly start. If you want to start, so you can always make copies of it. It already has your JavaScript, it has your CSS. And you just quickly start writing without having to worry about all those things. So just to go over some of the things that we've spoken about, I don't need this. So we spoke about conditionals, and let's do H1. Let's check conditionals. H1. Why is my caps lock on? H1 conditionals. Conditionals. Okay. So we said that there's a way we can check for conditionals, and okay, I don't think we need this. Conditional. So for example, let's declare a variable and let's call it number 1. Let's call it number 1 and let's assign we can do const. Like I'm saying, you only use let if you feel like you change it again, but use const because most likely you reassign things just so that your code is more robust. So let's do number 1 is equal to 25 and let's do const number 2. Number 2 is equal to maybe 30. Now we said the way we do conditionals is we have if, we open a bracket, then we open this. So I can say if number 1 is greater than number 2. If number 1 is greater than number 2, alert. Alert is just, I mean, you most likely not use it when you're writing real world code, but it's the way the browser just pops up things. So alert, I am bigger than you. Oh, sorry. Else, so else is just if it is not bigger. So if that is not true, what should I do? Else alert. Sorry. And like you can see, I'm putting it in quotation mark because it is text. So when it's text, I put in quotation mark. So sorry, you are bigger than me. So if let me open up the browser so that we can see it. If I pop this thing here. Oh, if I pop this thing here, if I save, what do we think will happen? So I've given number 1 25 and I've given number 2 30. And I'm saying that if number 1 is bigger than number 2, the browser should alert I am bigger than you. Else it will say, sorry, you're bigger than me. So if I save it, based on whichever is true, that is what will run. So let's save this and see if I save this, not actually save, if I just save this. Okay, I have to link my script. Again, I didn't link my script file, so it wasn't working. So I have to link my script file. So it says, sorry, you're bigger than me. The reason it's doing that is because it's checking. So it's checking the logic. So which one is bigger? 30 is bigger. So since 30 is bigger, it's saying that, sorry, you are bigger than me. Now, any questions? Any questions before we do more stuff? So I'm trying to not go too deep immediately. So please ask me questions so that I don't go too deep when we don't understand the surface. I mean, if it's too much, I could call it a day, but I mean, we have 30 more minutes. Okay. So far, how are we feeling? Are we overwhelmed? Are we in a good spot? Are we grasping the things? Today's the end of week 3, so I mean, we don't have so much time, but okay. So this is the way to do logic check. So we can do conditionals. Conditionals is a way of checking for if something is big, do this. If something is there, do. So like we can see, I just said if number 1 is this, do this. If number 2 is this, do that. Now let's just do this. Oh, a little overwhelmed. Oh, do you have any questions per se? Anything anyone would like me to go over? I mean, we're not in a rush to try and get through all the things. We'll rather let people understand. So maybe let me run it back. Let me run the JavaScript part back quickly. Then I have assigned some class materials, homework for you to read. Hopefully it will help solidify some of the things that we've looked at. So run the JavaScript back. I'm sorry if you hear, it's fine. Yeah, so we said programming is a way of telling a computer what to do. Not to go over this. We've said that the way we store things so that we can use them again is by declaring them as variables. Variables are a way of storing things so that we can use them. You don't want to write things and it'll just poof into the air, because if you don't store them anywhere, like your computer will remember that yesterday you did 1 + 1. But if I save them, then it will show something. For example, let me just quickly show something. So we know how to get inputs. So for example, let's do input and text. And don't worry about this, but in my JavaScript, I can try and put the name of my user. So document. Don't worry about this for now. I just want to show you something. Document get what's the query selector input. I just want to show the reason why we are declaring variables. So document get document that cost. Let's see what it is. And And please don't worry about all I'm typing. It's not necessary for you to understand. I just wanted to show you why it's important to store values. Okay, so okay. So for example, if I had a website and I needed a user to come and log in, button. I needed a user to come and log in. If the user logs in and they save their name, and I want to use the name for something, I have to store the name in a variable. So in this example, I'm saying that whatever name that the user enters in my form, I want to save that and I want to welcome them to my website. So let me put something in so that it's not small. Submit. So so if I came and I said my name is Cornelius and I submitted, sorry, I changed the thing to a button, so I have to oh, sorry, I have to do a few more things. I don't want to write everything, but essentially what I'm saying is, so you want to store things. You don't want to have things spoofing and thingy so that you can't use them for anything. So that is why variables are important, so that you can store things. So if I store them in my variable, then I can use them for anything. So if you come to my website, and maybe I should actually complete this. I mean, I know we haven't covered most of the things, so I'm tentative to like write stuff that will confuse people, but I guess it's fine. So that's the reason why variables are important, so that we can store things and continually reuse them. So think about if you had a site and somebody logged in, you want to get the name they've used to log in so that you can be like, oh, hello, welcome, whatever name they used. So that's why we use variables, because if we don't use variables, there's no way for us to continuously keep that and use them for different things. So that's why we have variables. Now we said that if we want to see things, if we want to log things, because usually if I write code and I want to run, I have to deploy. But if I quickly want to see what something is doing, I can just log it in the console. That's what console.log is for. We said the way that we can declare variables. So the way that we can actually declare the variables is by using let or const. Both of them do the same thing, but we use const mostly if we don't want to change the thing again. So for example, if somebody created an account on my website, I don't think that they will change their name eventually. I mean, they might change in the future, but the name they are using is what I want to keep on referring to them. So I'll save it in a const. So I just do const, username is whatever they've entered. So that's the way of me storing the value. So these are the ways we declare value by using this. We assign it a value by giving it equal to whatever is on the right side is the value that we are assigning to it. And one of the ways we can usually type out variable names is camel casing. You can use underscores. It's a free word, do what you want to do. But most likely it depends on like where you work. My place, they prefer camel casing. If your company, the convention is usually to use camel casing, you most likely be using camel case. But it's just convention that most developers use camel casing for JavaScript or for programming. So we use camel casing. And we've spoken about the different data types. So data types are just the different data that we have in JavaScript that we can use. So all the things that we can use has to fall under one of these things. So for example, if you invented something like maybe you invented your own type of text and it's not here, you can't use it because then it has to be like either a string, it has to be either a number, it has to be a Boolean. So all the things that we can do falls under one of these. All the data that we can manipulate and use for our own thing has to fall under one of these. So it can either be a string, it can be a number, it can be a Boolean, true or false, it can be null, empty. things like that. So those are the things. So not to be overwhelmed by all the things we're talking about, it's really just the data types, the different types of data that we have, and then what we can do with the data. So what we're trying to do was some of the things that we can do with the data, how we can manipulate the data, things like that. Any questions so far? Okay, so just so that let's try and do this before then we can run away. So let's do this. So again, about the conditional. So I just have this simple thing here. If I open it, stop live server. Open with live server. So let's just do this. Hopefully this makes sense. So all I'm saying is that in my HTML, I mean, I'm sure we all have HTML because it's not so hard to. So in my HTML, I just have a H1. I'm saying what is today. I'm saying what is today. Then I have a form which has different days. Then whatever you enter. So if you come into the Java, I just have the days of the week. Now I'm actually going to do something with the date. So if we look in our JavaScript, let me close that one so that it's not confusing. So I hope the HTML is not confusing. It's just the things we know. So now the things that we know, we can actually use it to do more advanced stuff. It's nothing different. So we have a form, we have a header. So class, we can go in. So if we go into our JavaScript file, all I'm saying is that, and forget this, we haven't learned this. So don't worry. So all I'm trying to do is I want to check what day it is. So for example, this is just me getting whatever thing the person types. So I'm just getting whatever the person. So for example, I can do if day is equal to Tuesday, and relax, don't get too confused. Let me write this out first. If day is equal to Tuesday, alert, yay, we have class today. Else, I'm just doing two conditionals. Alert, I hate today. So all this line of logic, and forget about this one. This one is just me trying to get the thing that I type in the code. But all I'm saying is that if whatever I enter is Tuesday, alert here, we have class today. So it's just conditional, just checking and then doing something based on the information I give. If it is not, it will be like, hey, I hate today. So let's test it. I'll see if it works. So first of all, let me type today is Wednesday. So if I check, it says, oh, I hate today. It's just checking based on the logic. So it's conditionals. If it is this, do this. Now, if I were to do, today is Tuesday, and I check, it says, yeah, we have class today. So it's essentially just conditionals are just, and next week, maybe we'll talk about how to get the values and stuff. So don't worry about that for now. But conditionals are just a way of taking the data that you have and doing something based on if it matches one thing or the other. So all I'm saying is that if today is this, do this. I could also add more things, but not to be confusing. But does the conditionals make sense? Conditionals make sense? Okay, Daniela says it makes sense. Josh says it makes sense. So those are conditionals. Those are conditionals. If then you so essentially this line of code is just and document.query selector is something that comes with JavaScript. So I'm just selecting whichever value comes in this ID. So like we can see in this, I give the day an ID of day. So I'm just targeting the day. The same way you target things in CSS, you can target things in JavaScript. So I'm just targeting and saying that whatever the person enters here, save that in day. So you can delete this line of code and it's just so because I wrote Tuesday, so now my thing becomes Tuesday. If I had written Wednesday in my form, the day will become Wednesday. So essentially, it is just taking whichever data I provide and it's storing it here. And it's storing it in this variable day. And then based on that, I'm using the variable to do something. So that's why we store things in variables so that we can use them to do different things. So those are conditionals. Conditionals are just if statements. If this, do this. If today is Monday, do this. If I'm tired, go to bed. Like if I'm tired, go to bed. If it is 10 p.m. So you can do different things with conditionals. You can present different options to your users based on the conditions. So don't be confused about conditionals. It's essentially an if block. If this, do this. If that, do that. All those things. So hopefully that wasn't too confusing. I mean, hopefully that was understandable. Confusing has negative connotations. So, yeah. So those are the things that we're talking in our if conditionals. So we have 17 more minutes. I don't want to go into new materials because there's a lot. And what I'd recommend you do is I've added 2 things that I want us to do after. I mean, before our next meeting, when we meet next week, Tuesday, we'll run over some of these things. Then we'll try and go into more data manipulation and doing like fun stuff with what we have. And just to show you, we can do like even more fun stuff when we understand our JavaScript. So for example, I have this and I've shared all this code. You can play around with it. So essentially, I have this simple code, and if I look in my HTML, if I open this in my Open Relax server, if I open this, I just have I mean, just to show you when you start to understand JavaScript, you can do a lot more fun stuff. So I have this thing, and let me just show you the logic. It's just simple logic, some of the things that we've spoken about. Again, we don't understand these things, but all I'm saying is that if I click this, make my background green. If I click this, make my color this. If I click this, and it's just the same if statement that we've been learning, and we can use that to do like more fun stuff that when we start to understand. So I'm saying that if the user clicks, if what I'm clicking on is the purple, make the whole background purple, make the background, and it's just the things we know, the HTML. We know that CSS is for things, the coloring and things. So I'm using my JavaScript to add behavior. Like we said, JavaScript allows us to add interaction. I'm saying that if I click this, make my color this, if I click this. And don't be worried, the more we start to understand, the more like fun things we can build. And the more experimentation. So this is going to be like first of all, I guess the first time when you're learning something, first time when you're learning something, I mean, it's the first time you guys are being introduced to JavaScript. I mean, maybe some of us have experience with Python or something, but it's the first time we are running across it. So it's fine if everything doesn't make sense right now. But the only thing just to understand is the main things you have to understand is your variables, how to store things in your variables. Then the other thing is conditionals. And the last, I guess, the most fundamental things that when you understand, you can do like a lot more things is just to understand like your variables, you understand your conditionals. Next time when we meet, we'll talk about functions. And when we understand those 3 things, our variables, our conditionals, our functions, will become dangerous. We'll be able to do anything that we want to do. So don't worry, if you need to watch the video over again, you can watch it slowly if I talk too fast, or you can watch it at 1.5 speed if I talk too slow. But just watch it again, review the things that we have spoken about, and try to write code. Don't just listen, try to implement the things that we know. Now you know the different data types. You know how you can quickly check for it in your browser. So I mean, even if you don't know how to open it in your browser, you should hopefully know how to do that. You know that you can just open your browser. If you open your browser and you do inspect, I mean, if you open inspect, you came to your console, you could just like type out things quickly, just test it out. You can check what type of data am I using? Is there a number? Just check things. So it's more like getting your hands in the mud and doing things. But just before we go, these are the things. So I mean, just so that we practice on the flexbox and positioning stuff that we learned the last time, I want all of us to try flexbox froggy, flexbox froggy, just to practice. It's a very fun way to learn flexbox and how to get things to move where we wanted to move. I mean, we did it together, but I want you to practice on your own. Like if I wanted something to be in the middle, how do I do a flex box? This is a good way to learn. And then I have a video from the GOAT himself, by Travesy. He has a crash course on Python. A crash course on JavaScript. So I recommend that we all watch it. It'll go over most of the things. You might not understand everything, but when we come back to class, we'll run it over. The last thing too I wanted to do is show in the class, in the homework materials, I have some homework there. I mean, I would want us to do. I know not everybody was able to submit the previous homework, but I put together a front-end method thing for us to try. And it's for your own good so that you're able to practice stuff. So if you come in the design, there's the thing that they want you to do. So this is the design. So you are going to build out a simple cut, and you have the image, you have the font size. So if you check the style guide, it has all the things that you should do. So, I mean, just if you don't understand how to do layouts, look it up, or you can text me, but these are the colors that they want you to use. So these are the colors for the text. So you don't have to go and Google. So you can just set your color like the way you've been doing color. Then, I mean, this is not a CSS file, but you do your color, then your color will be this for whichever thing they want you to use that color for. So do this. This is the font size they want you to use. These are the fonts they want you to use. So it's a good way to like practice and actually build stuff, and you get better at it. So this is, I mean, I looked at it. I think it's not too complex. It's just CSS and JavaScript, CSS and HTML, sorry. So it's the things that we've learned. We know how to put pictures. We know how to do headings. We know how to do text. We know how to do colors. So we should all be able to do it. I mean, we'll give ourselves 2 weeks. So it's not due next week, it's due the week afterwards. So please, please, please don't just go and not code it and think that you understand it in your head. This one, they mean I'm pleading with you. I beg you, please build it. Build it. I mean, I'll take it, but it's not for me, it's for you. Build it. This one is also a very simple thing. I mean, we know how to do white backgrounds. We know how to put things next to each other, do different backgrounds. If you have any questions, come and ask your colleagues on the page. Somebody has probably figured it out. So yeah, any questions before we run out? Okay, so yeah, thank you all for joining today. Thank you for taking time to learn some JavaScript. JavaScript is a long journey. I saw a tweet this week. Someone was like, he has been doing HTML and CSS for like 30 years, but every time he wants to add an image, he has to go and Google how to do it. So it's just one of those things where you don't have to know everything off head. You just have to have a firm understanding. You can always Google stuff if you don't understand. So don't worry about having everything in your head. It's just really having an understanding where you can manipulate stuff. Then you even know what to search on Google. Because if you don't understand anything, when you want to search something on Google, what are you even going to Google? So the thing is, every developer Googles, like use ChatGPT, you Google, you do all those things. So, I mean, thank you for learning some JavaScript. We'll be back on Tuesday. We'll learn some more advanced JavaScript. There's no homework due for Tuesday. There's no homework due for Saturday. The homework is due for next week, the week afterwards. So thank you all and have a wonderful evening. So I'll stop recording now.